Dare I say heart and soul? This must be heart and soul. Yes, yes. So I want to begin, first of all, by saying thank you to my dear brother Ishmael Tete for being with us last week. So grateful for his wisdom and consciousness and his willingness to share. Yes, thank you, my brother. Thank you. We have the month of June for Heart and Soul. Our theme is joy. And so there's an affirmation that our practitioner core is offering. And I'm going to ask that we repeat it together. I know some of you did. It's worthy of a do-over. Thank you. It's worthy of a do-over. So I'm sensing that we're going to have a slide momentarily, and we'll be able to do this. All of this, you know what? There's a part of me that is feeling that giddy, weak knee thing that I feel when whatever I've written no longer matters, and something else begins to unfold. So let's go with this. So the affirmation is everything necessary to the full and complete expression of the most boundless experience of joy is mine now. Let's breathe that in. Let's breathe that in. Everything necessary. Everything. So on this adventure in faith, where we include our acknowledgement that this is how we celebrate and honor pride, I want to just acknowledge that the calling this Pride Month is born out of a shift in focus. Because if you think about it, for someone's to declare, I'm sorry. For someone's to declare, we're calling this Pride Month, it flies in the face of the way folks were feeling. Because, first of all, there was no month dedicated, supported, focused. But largely the feelings were feelings of shame, feelings of less thanness, feelings of guilt, feelings of. And so now, kind of the subliminal guidance is pride.
That's right.
Is that regardless of what your family of origin and the folks you went to school with and the folks you work with, that regardless of the way that that's set up, that you somehow find a way within you, a measure of pride. Can you hear me? A measure of pride. Whatever amount, each one unto his, her, their selves. Howsoever one can stand in something else. That's the calling. Don't you love it? That someone said, you know what? Call it pride. Because that's going to trigger some folks. Everyone won't understand it. Everyone won't embrace it. But for some folks, it's going to change from whence they come. Their approach to who and how they are and what time it is on their planet. So we celebrate. We acknowledge, and much like Black History Month, we're not limited it to the 30 days. We're just using this as a way to galvanize our intention, to remind us. And I get, as a kid, when we played in the household, it was all, if it was up to me, we were always playing school. And I was always teaching. And so, that still goes on now. So when we show up on Sundays, there's some kind of little lesson in there. And largely, it's my own lesson. It's what I find is that for Black history, and here's the thing right here, is that more so now, which is interesting, because things are changing in a way that the folks who really knew the stories, who really knew the truth, who knew the accurate history, so many of them have passed on. And so now we're left with what's been written. And now we find that there are those who are like, yeah, it's been written, but we ain't telling nobody. And in fact, we are going to kind of overspeak what's been written. So it's been written and that's there, but we're going to act like it's not there because we largely have a culture that does not read. We talk, we hear. We don't even listen well. But we kind of hear pretty well. So there's some stuff we heard and we act just like that is the truth. And it often is not. It often is totally unrelated to the truth. So today, my sense is we're going to do our best to coordinate this because we're not going to work with what I have set up and some of the slides. So we're going to do our best to not reveal. My sense is this is a three-parter. I did have the insight this morning that this was a two-parter. I'm clear now it's not. It's because we're not doing that. But I want whatever happens this morning, I want it to happen out of the container of joy. Yeah? So there's some stuff for us to know, much like the story of folks of African ancestry in these United States. In a container of joy, you still have to know all the stress and strife. And yet you want to understand it in a container that includes your joy. Because you're attentive to this. I'm not suggesting that you, okay, so not to talk about that. So here's what I am suggesting. I'm suggesting that your listening and your response is born out of your awareness of how we got over. Of how LGBT, all the folks got over beyond hiding in the cut. Fearful in every moment. Now, there are still some folks who feel it's essential that they hide in the cut. That they know it's not safe for them. They won't be able to support their family. Their children won't be safe. Whatever it is that they have an awareness of their specific situation and circumstances. We're not criticizing that. We are instead, we're joy seekers this month. We're joy seekers. That means that what I mean by that is that we won't necessarily see the joy right away. Because some of us want to counsel and tell people what time it is for them to come out. And in truth, we don't know. Nobody knows. We have a view, but it's not our life. And so folks have to go according to their own energetic timetable. And we are seeking joy so that we can know that it's right for them whenever they tell their parents. If they never come out, if they retire before they come out. However it works, we are joy seeking so that we can find the joy in their living. Yeah. Yes. Is this making sense? Yeah. We have work to do. Yes. We have work to do. Because with just a crumb of information, we start coaching. knowing what folks ought to do, where they ought to go, and how it ought to be. I'm going to ask us to cut that out. Allow folks their own evolution. Honor the process. This honoring runs deep. This is not a surface honoring. Well, we just honor. And this morning, for the first time in years, certainly since the last time we played the song as a part of the opening for our service was before COVID. Eddie Watkins Jr., this door is open. Whether you're black or white, gay or straight, Christian, Buddhist, or Jew, this door is open to you, is part of the lyric. And so our intention is that every Sunday from now on, that's how we open, just reminding us that our honoring is required on so many levels, that that's a part of our lesson. That it doesn't necessarily, it's not a surface skim of, oh, I honor it, which means, I don't know what that means. This is a greater depth, a clearer intention, a higher honoring of individuals. I almost said of humanity, but that's makes it so impersonal that you really don't have to take any action. So I want to say instead, for absolutely everyone. Now that'll keep us busy. You won't be able to gossip. You won't have a lot of moment just continuing to get your mind on that loop of honoring each individual and their choice for the living of their life. Mine isn't like yours. Yours isn't like hers. Hers isn't like his. His isn't like theirs. And so it's an opportunity for us to somehow expand in a way where we find the breadth, the bandwidth, the breadth and scope to be and allow others to be. So look, I know that, San Francisco has as their theme for Pride, and I've co-opted it because I thought, oh, Sookie, looking back and looking forward. It invites us to do this thing that I call in my coaching, tagging back to spring forward. It invites us to make sure before we start talking about it, before we start moving in ways to find out what it really is. So y'all are collectively, if not individually, smarter than I. And so my sense is that there's a lot y'all already know. I'm going to ask you just to bear with me, because there are a lot of folks like me who don't know like you know. So very often, we begin our Pride story historically with Stonewall. And that's not to take anything away from Stonewall, it's just to acknowledge that it didn't begin there. But let's first of all discern what that is. So, because not everybody even understands that part of it. So look, in the early morning hours of June 28th, 1969, a group of plainclothes officers, police officers, raided Stonewall Inn. It was a popular gay bar located on Christopher Street in New York City's West Village. Raids on gay bars and establishments were a common practice. It was part of their surveillance and violence at the time. But this one ignited a fire. It literally and figuratively. It's a moment when my sense is there's not a one of us within the sound of my voice who hadn't decided they've heard enough. And we don't know, often we don't know when that is. We don't have a plan. We don't decide that on June 28th of 1969, that's it. Anything, if it happens, then that's it. It's just a collective moment. But here's what's important to understand and recall. Just like in your life, that moment has a history.
That's right.
That moment was prepared for by consciousness. So there's a consciousness that is developing. Look back, look, y'all can see. You can see it, yes? So there's this moment, and often we get caught up in the media with this moment, and we miss that there's a whole trail of consciousness that brought this moment to fruition. Now, we, of all people, have an understanding by right of consciousness. We know that life is unfolding for each and every one of us by right of consciousness, by what we believe, by what we know, by what we are standing in, breathing in, by who we are, not by name, but by nature, by divine nature. So we see that there's a whole trail that precedes Stonewall that was required in order for Stonewall to unfold as not another raid. Not another raid. Because we don't even know how many. We don't even know how many. We know that one, though, it's like we read the story of abused women. And there's just a moment when we didn't even know she had that in her. And it's not it's not an emotional snap. That's not the situation I'm talking about. That's that moment. Oh my God, yes. I remember as a youngster, my mother opening the back door, and a dear friend and neighbor who had children our age, and they all came in. And of course, it was grown folks' business. And we were sent off, but I had a listening. I had a listening. And she was walking away from the situation and circumstance of that marriage. And what I remember was my mother giving her a safe place to land. And it's not like I wouldn't have thought we had enough to do that. But apparently we did. And so this is the awakening of that in and as us. That remember what the affirmation said? Everything necessary is mine now. So we have whatever is required. The folks there that night, and I don't even know, y'all. Come on now. Look, we don't know specifically who was there. Thank you. We don't know specifically who was there. We don't know, meaning who among the regulars. Y'all know there's never been, can I give as an example like a plane crash? There's never been one where somebody didn't reveal that they were scheduled to be on that flight. And what they overslept, they didn't, whatever it was, they weren't there for that. And so I use that as an example because we don't know who was there on the regular who didn't come that night. We don't know who never had been there before who came that night. But what we know is that it was the ideal combination. It was exactly what was required to ignite a change that we're still talking about. I want to make sure that that's not all we're talking about, though. That we don't just rest there and see that as the all in all. Because the US and the world has the stories out of Berlin pre-World War I, even in terms of the space that gay folks, homosexuals, that gay folks had at the time, are fascinating. That we find that folks have always rallied for the fullness of their self-expression, even when there's a boot on their neck. So look, so despite what you may hear about commemorations around Stonewall, it was not the spark that ignited the gay rights movement. There's a full history before Stonewall and after Stonewall. Not just in the United States, but Europe, British activists can join Stonewall UK, for example. Pride parades in Germany and Austria and Switzerland are called Christopher Street Day, after the street in New York City on which the Stonewall Inn still sits. But there were gay activists before that early morning in 1969. And there were also other rebellions of LGBTQ people against police, earlier calls for gay power and earlier riots. What was different about Stonewall was what happened after, in the commemoration. Because for all of the others, the next day it was forgotten. Like, I grew up in Berkeley, and you know, it's in our blood. It's in the water, apparently, in Berkeley. But if my life depended on it, I couldn't tell you all the protests that we marched in, etc. And most of us can't. There is something about specific moments that have the perfect admixture of whatever it is that occupies our attention in a way that we commemorate it. That we say, this is the one for the history books. And the rest of it kind of falls to the side. For example, San Francisco activists mobilized in response to police raids on gay bars in the early 60s. And it came to a head in a raid on a New Year's Eve ball in 1965 that eventually brought down the police commissioner. The New Year's Eve raid attracted wide media attention. It garnered heterosexual support and is credited with galvanizing local activists. And it was subsequently forgotten. So it's not always just what happened and how many people were involved. There's something about our selective memory. There's something about what, and I don't know the answer. I don't have that part of it, but I just want to lift up for us that we have work to do. We have work to do for where we land. And I'm not mad about Stonewall. I just want us to have an awareness that that's not nearly the whole story. In 1966, in San Francisco, they rioted at Compton's cafeteria, smashing all the windows of a police car, setting fires, picketing the restaurant for its collusion with the police. The city's gay establishment did not participate, however, and distanced themselves from the transgender and street youths and the political organization Vanguard behind the violent protest. So we got work to do. In our awareness, in our familiarity with history. In the 1967 raid of the Black Cat Bar, it led to a demonstration of 400 people, and it garnered the evening news coverage. Because, see, that's something to it, too. It's not always even publicized in ways. You had to almost be there. And San Francisco was not the only U.S. city. It's interesting because in this series that is unfolding for me, I was surprised with a particular city to see how they showed up so early. They don't get a lot of credit, but we're going to give them some later on. So the various raids, bar raids in the late 60s in Los Angeles also prompted resistance. There was an annual demonstration for gay rights before Stonewall. However, it provides the best example of how gay politics were growing and changing before the riots. Beginning in 1965, Philadelphia, LGBTQ activists began an annual picket of Independence Hall on the 4th of July to protest state treatment of homosexuals. Now, some of y'all know this, but some of y'all don't. And it's important that we have a sense of kind of the breadth and scope of not a movement, but a consciousness. Does anyone recall during the civil rights sit-ins and when we saw the police with the water hose, etc., do you recall that we never saw anyone at a sit-in in jeans and an old t-shirt? Nobody ever looked like they just woke up and came on in. Although I'm sure folks did just get up and come on in. So it was a concentrated effort and intentionality that everyone who participated in that had to go through a process so that one, they wouldn't be spitting back, and that two, that the way they looked would not alienate the people that they were wanting to get to support. Do you see how deep the roots had to go? All right, so this is what's happening. I say that to you because I know you're familiar with that visual, and many of you know just how intentional and specific it was, what was required. Okay, in Philadelphia. When they would picket, they were somberly dressed men and women with carefully worded signs who walked solemnly in front of this iconic building where the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution were debated and signed. So, full intentionality. So that their look would not alienate. Very specific. Do you understand what I'm saying? All right. These annual reminders, because they would do it every year, were the result of what? Coordination by activists, just like what we saw televised and what we know by the stories out of SNCC and CORE, etc. at the time. These were activists in New York and Washington and Philadelphia, which gave us evidence also of the collaboration and the coordination. They would have us believe that there isn't any. But there. That's right. And yet these events unraveled in the week after Stonewall. The Philadelphia activists voted later in 1969 to shift the 1970, when they were ready for that commemoration, from a picket of Independence Hall to a parade in the streets on the Stonewall anniversary. You remember, and I'll ask them to put up the slide, I've been focusing on that lower left quadrant of our map of consciousness. And what I want to remind us of the consciousness that's there, it's a consciousness of life is happening to me. There's not an activist who can do their work with that consciousness. Life is happening to me is a disempowered place. But you can tell by the posture, by the staging of that one. That one is locked in this defeated place in consciousness. The movement cannot be built out of that. It doesn't mean that the people involved leading and organizing, it doesn't mean they've never been there. It doesn't mean they won't be there again. It means it's not the consciousness of the movement, though. Part of what's there is being at the effect of race consciousness. That's the victim mindset. Being at the effect of race consciousness, it's whatever they call you, you begin to believe that that's what you are. That's not a movement. Well, I guess it could be, but it's a different kind. So what we find in this is an opportunity to stand up in an awareness of who, somebody would say whose, of who and how I am and what all is possible. Yes? So look, it's in that place. I want you to see our little guy that's they. I want you to see them. that's in that lower left quadrant. I want you to see them rising up with a sense of taking their freedom off the shelf.
That's right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Putting it on a chain, wearing it around its neck, wearing it around their neck, putting it in the car, riding around in it. It's the idea here of treating life, my life, your life, our life, like it's golden. Yeah. What comes to my mind is that for some people, that means tucking it away safely. Come on now. This is for us to allow. For some, it's really tucking it away. It's putting it in the perfect silk bag. It's wrapping it in something. Oh, come on now, I'm going back now. It's tucking it in the underwear drawer. In the back, in the corner. Yeah? I don't know where you're going to put it, but for some folks, that's treating it like it's golden. Because it's fragile. It's precious. It needs protecting in a way. But as Jill Scott said, and then Takia worked it out for us, throw it around your neck, put it in the car, ride with it. Just out front with it, curbside, yes. We have the breadth and scope to allow folks to be and do as they need to be and do. In our daily read, Guidance for a Spiritual Journey by Dr. Daniel L. Morgan, tomorrow's read is what I want to share with you. It's entitled Yesterday, Today, and Tomorrow. And remember, we're tagging back. So what he's saying to us is that one reason we fail to make greater progress in spiritual work, and I'm going to say in all our lives, is that we do not let go of the past. Oh, allow me to tell you a cautionary tale, but don't. When we don't let go of the past, he says, it holds us back. We try to take up new things. Of course we do. We all want the new idea, but we don't have the space for it. He says, until we've let go of the stuff we're holding on to. And so often what we're holding on to in this instance is how we see ourselves. We want to be the new me. We took the workshop, we read the book, we're inspired to be, to do, to have. But we haven't changed our mind about who we are, how we see ourselves. Yes, what's possible for us hasn't changed. We see it in weight loss all the time. So the vision is there, and they come across a diet or a plan, and there's all of that, but they haven't changed their mind about who they are. And until that happens, there will not be a sustainable shift. Yes? He says, before we can really enter a new day and fill our lives with new blessings, we must learn how to release the failures, problems, and mistakes of yesterday. He says, forget. I felt like y'all would make me explain what he meant by that, so I just changed it to release. One of the principal causes of delayed healing and answers to treatment, he says, is the failure to release the anxieties, the hates, the regrets, the worries, the fears that originally caused the undesirable conditions. He is working it out for us. Our first Sunday, as we acknowledge pride as an intention, not just a word in rainbow colors, but as an intention to live with a certain pride, not about something, but about somebody. Yes. He says, instead of magnifying the good, we remember the bad and deprive ourselves of the joys of the present. Y'all remember that we have our joy affirmation. And we know that everything that is required is already there. So there's no need any longer. This is a new day for us. A day when we're not dragging all of the past into the present so that it prevents us from having the full joy and pride. The fullness, thank you. Yeah, the kingdom of God is at hand yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And what that says to me is that we're covered. Whatever you're worried about. He's saying the divine was with you then. Which is why, remember, for years we said, thank you for everything. I have no complaint whatsoever. We were training ourselves to acknowledge that even though there's a mess back there, you're like, I see you, mess, and thank you for everything. I see you, mess. I see you in that difficult situation. I see that moment that it brought me to my knees. I see that moment where I'm in court or where I'm afraid I will be or where I'm in the hospital and I'm getting the prognosis, wherever I'm at the bank and they're telling me something I don't want to hear. Thank you for everything. Because all of that poured into the moment that I'm breathing right now. All of that. All of that is feeding me right now. It made me who I am. You see, I know something out of that. If I hadn't had that, I wouldn't know this thing I know right now so that I can stand the way I stand, so that I can walk the way I walk, so that I can feel the way I feel about it. Yes, because what I've been through some stuff. And we all have. The key is to use it, to transmute it into what is beneficial for the next moment, for the living of our lives as if it is golden. Why? Because it is. Because it is. Dr. Dan quotes Robert Jones Burdett, who said there are 2 days in the week about which and upon which I never worry. 2 carefree days, kept sacredly free from fear and apprehension. Come on. One of these days is yesterday, and the other day I do not worry about is tomorrow. That's an advanced awareness. Because some of us master and have a doctorate in worrying about tomorrow. How you use today, Dr. Dan says, will determine how tomorrow uses you. It doesn't just determine it, it sets up the possibility. What I'm thinking now, today, how I'm engaged, says everything about what I'm open to, what's possible tomorrow. Because something, here, I know y'all understand this. There is something in my consciousness right now, depending upon, well, there always is something at some point that absolutely is a determinant about what I have access to tomorrow. In this right now moment. Why? Because it's done unto each and every one of us as we believe. So what I'm believing right now shuts some stuff out for tomorrow. Now, some of it, that's good news. You're like, oh, thank you, God, yes. But some of it is like a thief in the night, ensuring that I don't have access to my heart's desire because I did not create the opening for it. Oh, we can see we got some nighttime mirror work to do. We've talked about our mirror work for mornings and our gratitude work. And now we see that before we go to bed, in that creative time overnight, that we want to precondition it to open it to the greater possibility. Always, yes? Yes, yes, yes. So look. Not at me. Look among yourselves. Ooh, Lord. Shoot. Okay. T.S. Eliot. I've shared this quote with you, and I feel like it's one that we're going to be seeing for a while. This idea that your present circumstances, and here's, I'm tagging back because I know some folks at Stonewall knew this. It didn't just come to them that night. They knew that their present circumstance could not possibly determine their future. It simply said, this is what time it is right now. And so within us, what we're working to feed within us so that it would grow, so that it would expand in our awareness, we live by right of consciousness. And so we're forever working to expand our consciousness. Intentionally, consciously and intentionally, so that we are living beyond the determinant of yesterday and simply seeing it as what time it is. Oh, that's what it is right now. But that does not determine. That is true. We're not denying it. So right now, the raid is going on, right? Last week it was, the week before that, it might have been the night before even. I'm going through whatever it is I'm going through, but that's not going to determine my tomorrow. What determines my tomorrow is me, my mindset, my consciousness, what I believe. In Ecclesiastes 3, and there's a part of me that's still wondering, why this one? So I know it'll come to me, but I'm just being obedient. So here it is. And many of you are familiar with this scripture because it sets it up for us that for everything in life, there's a season. Right now, what comes to me is this awareness of our acceptance. That sometimes it's going to be this, and sometimes it's going to be that, and sometimes it's going to be this, and sometimes it's going to be that, and sometimes, there, for everything, there's a season. It means that your life can contain, none of this is like off limits for anybody, that any life can contain it. But you see, it also contains what we might consider its opposite. So there's going to be the presence of hatred. Oh, but there's going to be a time of love. Now, this is not an invitation. When I was a kid, I interpreted this as it was locked down. You know, like there's a time for this and a time for this, and you just need to get the timetable. and see what happens. See what time it is, what's happening when. As if I didn't know that I had some power in that. I didn't know that I could affect the timetable, that in a sense I'm writing the timetable by right of consciousness. See, I didn't know that that's how it's unfolding. I thought it was like fixed. There's a time for this and there's a time for that, so just get ready. But instead, it's an inside job. I'm just offering this for consideration. That within me is already kind of baked in. There's a time to weep and there's a time to laugh. And I get to determine what that time is. I'm going to weep some, but I'm also going to laugh. Now, sometimes, I don't know if you all understand what I'm saying, because sometimes we get locked in. And that time to weep feels like it's forever. You know, as a young adult, as a teenager, actually, I was not a young adult. I was still in high school. I attempted suicide. And what I recall about the energetic of that time is that I thought it was a forever time. I don't know if you really get it. I thought what I was experiencing then was the rest of my life. That feeling, that was all. See, I didn't know that one day I'd be a mature woman. And would not even be able to remember specifically what was going on then. In that moment, I thought time would freeze. See, I didn't know that there would be a time to weep, a time to doubt myself, and a time to celebrate being me. See, I didn't know. I didn't know the fluidity of it. Yes. Oh, I hope y'all are keeping up, because if somebody just tuned in, they're like, this is the pride message? But yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Y'all gonna have to help each other out. If somebody asks you, like, what was that? Oh, forgiveness is a good thing. So look, a time to seek and a time to lose. So don't get caught up in the lose part of it. In the loss, there's not a one of us who hasn't had some loss. Oh, and there's not a one of us who is not yet, who doesn't continue to seek something beyond that. Yes.
So there's only one consciousness, one divine intelligence, one truth, one life, one spirit, one love. And it is my life now. And it is the life and the light of Heart and Soul Center of Light. And the entire world, one light. And I am thankful. I am thankful that it all fades in to God. I release it. I let it go. Ashe, amen, and so it is.